So Matt, nice to see you, buddy.
It's been a while.
It's been a while. So with me today is the indomitable Matt from Planet of the Grapes. The first time I met Matt must have been in like somewhere in the 2000s, maybe 2007, 2008. I came to your Leadenhall shop. Did you have it open by then, yeah?
Yeah.
And you were behind the bar with one of your co-workers, business partners, and you guys were so enthusiastic about wine. And I just loved your whole concept. You were doing, retail plus £10 corkage, and I used to go there with all my clients all the time. I loved your Leadenhall shop.
I kind of forget that you actually work in the city.
Yeah. And then what I really loved about it is it was called Planet of the Grapes, which is just the most fucking awesome name for a wine bar.
You know the story behind that?
I'd love to know.
I have a friend that I went to uni with called Tayo, and he's back in the days he was a DJ.
Okay.
He now makes podcasts. Actually.
He makes podcasts. Yeah. Okay.
And does radio programs, but he was a breakbeat DJ, and he did a mix album called Planet the Breaks. And I actually met up with a load of old friends from Southampton, where I'm from, and we sat in an old pub drinking Ringwood Best.
Okay.
Great beer.
Yeah.
And we came up with some terrible names. My old business partner was called Mark Wise, and I'm Matt Harris, so we came up with Eminem, which is terrible. Wise Harris, which makes it sound like I'm wise. But then it got his name first on the billing. I wasn't going to have that. Grapes of Wrath, which we thought was too
dark,
too negative.
John Steinbeck.
And then I think we were about 6 pints in, and a couple of my mates just literally were like, "Hang on." They were having a quick chat to each other, and it was like, "Well, I've got it," and they just announced the name. And when we'd all picked ourselves up off the floor laughing, we were like, "It's brilliant. We'll do that." And then I turned around to I think it was my father-in-law, and I turned around and I said, "Yeah, we're going to call it Planet of the Grapes." And he was like, "Oh, it's ridiculous. You'll never sell any wine with a name like that." He actually said, "Who's going to take you seriously with a name like that?" And I was like, "That's fair enough. Good point." But I just did it anyway. And it stuck. There you go.
I love it.
I also, you may not know this, but it's also a brand of weed that you can buy in America as well.
Planet of the Grapes.
Yeah, we didn't trademark in the States. We trademarked in Europe and the UK.
Okay, excellent.
So in the States you can buy weed under Planet of the Grapes, and in the UK you can buy wine.
So don't get confused, right?
Yeah, don't get confused.
Don't get confused. Your night could end up very different.
You can get high on my supply in a slightly different way.
Brilliant. So thanks for joining us today, Matt. I'd love to kind of dig further into your story. So when you came up with a name, and then you decided, okay, I'm going to do wine bars. What were you doing before that, by the way? Just a quick intro into what were you doing before
actually it was a wine shop. So I was a fairly lazy college student, and ended up, I was lazy as far as college work was concerned, but I ended up doing 30 hours a week at Threshers on Brixton Road.
And you loved it?
And I really enjoyed it, apart from I got interviewed by internal security because I missed 3 armed robberies in the 20 or so months I was there. Okay. And the last armed robbery I missed because I moved shifts. I went to play.
So it looked suspicious.
Yeah, I played 7-a-side football in Spitalfields actually.
Okay.
And that was on a Monday night. And so I offered to do this lady's Sunday shift because she was a churchgoer. Didn't drink, churchgoer, worked in a wine shop. You worked that one out. Anyway, I did her shift for her on a Sunday. She did mine for me on a Monday, and she got tied up out the back and had a sawn off put in her face and got robbed.
Threshers with a sawn off.
And I changed my shift the day before.
That looked very suspicious. Huh?
So I actually got interviewed by a nice chap called Piers, who sounds really posh, but he wasn't. He was the head of Whitbread's internal security.
Okay.
For the wine chains, and he came and spoke to me and said, basically along the lines of, "You're a student. Do you have any debt? Do you need money? And why do you keep not working when they get robbed?" Yeah, you keep changing your shift the day before they get robbed. And I was like, I think if I had a need for some money, I might try and get away with a bit more than 400 Benson Hedges and a Magnum of Courvoisier. 400 Benson. Do you know what I mean? It's like Magnum of Courvoisier. Is that all they took? The worst one at Threshers actually. So this is all when I was at uni. And what year was this roughly? Hang on, born 73, so it would have been early 90s, like early 91, 92.
Okay, brilliant. Yeah.
There was one instance, so they always used to warn you when you worked at Threshers, they'd have Whitbread vouchers. But that's the kind of thing that would get stolen because you'd sell them through the till. So they'd be in the till.
Yeah.
So if they got stolen, they'd send you a memo round about which numbers to look for.
Okay.
Which lot numbers. Some guy comes in to pay for some Bensons and some Courvoisier with these Whitbread vouchers. And I sort of jokingly said to him, where'd you get these? Smiling. And he went, from my mum for my birthday. Like really stern face. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I just ignored it, took the vouchers, went off. Next day, get asked to come back to the shop, and the police are there. And I was like, what's this all about? And he said, do you recognise this transaction from last night? I was like, yeah. And he said, what's the conversation you're having with him? And I said, I'm asking him where he got the vouchers. He went, yeah, he stabbed a guy through the hand in the Thresher wine shop on Streatham Hill.
Okay,
to get stole these vouchers and then came down the road and bought things. And I was like, and there's me going, where'd you get these from?
My mum.
I was like, from then on, I was like, anybody could pay with any vouchers anytime they wanted. I was like, not going to ask any questions.
Or if you want the wine for free, that's also okay.
Yeah, just take it. Just take it. Yeah.
Wow, that's
so that was so my grounding was at Threshers, and then I ended up working back in Southampton. There was a Bottoms Up, which was
I remember those. Yeah.
Slightly higher brow than the Thresher wine shops. A bit more wine. My actual real grounding on wine was my parents used to do trips to France to the Loire Valley.
Yeah.
So me and my brother were allowed little tasters of wine.
That's interesting because that's how I fell in love with wine, was in the Loire Valley.
Yeah, we had a town twinning family that we stayed with. Okay. And they were in like a converted farmhouse, and you looked out the window in the morning and it was like the Muscadet vineyards.
Fantastic.
So
west.
Yeah, I reckon even at that age I looked out, I was going, what's going over there?
Yeah.
What did you do with that?
What do you do with that?
And the guy was like kind of slightly crazy sculptor, like really fun family.
Wispy hair.
Exactly that. Was that? Yeah, he had wispy hair. But I remember my parents being over there, and sometimes they'd come over and then they'd leave me and my brother, and we had to speak French. So they'd force you into speaking French. Okay. And so I've got bar French. I can speak.
Yeah.
I can get away with it with having a drink, but my grammar and everything's terrible. But anyway, we go over there, and I remember at the end of the meal, he took a picture off the wall and reached his hand into the wall, and brought out his own homemade Poire William.
Right.
And when you look at that as a kid, you're like, it's cool. I like this. This is good.
His wife probably doesn't know it's there, right?
Yeah. I think she knew full well. But yeah, both parents from Salvation Army families, so shouldn't really be in the wine trade at all. But
interesting.
But my mum and dad quite like a glass of wine. Mm-hmm. Not drinkers, but they like wine.
Yeah.
So I had that introduction. So I went to college, wasn't very good at my studies, was good at working at Threshers, and then just fell into a full-time job with actually at Wine Rack on the Fulham Road.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yeah.
Had some great customers. Some Nick Rhodes used to be in Duran, like a regular. Nice guy. So I got to learn about wine. I had a great manager called Thierry from the south of France.
Yep.
French people couldn't understand him.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand him, but he liked a nice glass of wine, so he taught me a bit.
Cool.
And then I became the manager of the wine rack on Walton Street, which is basically it's literally
in South Kent.
It's the safest shop in the world because it's opposite the diplomatic armed police station. So I had one.
And that's where the first Itu was as well, right?
Is that right?
On Walton Street, yeah.
Well, I had Nina Campbell, famous Irish novelist. Not Nina Campbell, what's her name? Nina Campbell's the bloody interior designer. She passed away last year. Edna O'Brien.
Okay.
So she was my literal next door neighbour. Wow. She was great fun and loved a glass of wine.
So you were on Walton Street?
Yeah, and I was the manager there.
And how long did you spend there?
Sam Whitbread, who was the old boy, as in from Whitbread.
Right.
He had a flat nearby.
And he'd pop in?
Well, apparently he might have done, but would never have introduced himself.
Right.
But basically, it was really safe. My customers used to bring me wine. So there was an old boy around the corner who said none of his family liked Madeira, and he liked to share a bottle with me. Okay. And he brought in some 1960.
Did he insist you drink it with him?
Yeah. But it was full of sediment, and he'd used a pair of his wife's tights to decant it.
In your shop?
Yeah. Just like, and as he was pouring it, he was saying, I just want you to know that these have been washed.
Yes.
And I was like, yeah, that's good.
That's okay.
So yeah, that was a good grounding. And then opposite that wine rack was a La Reserve wine merchants.
Nice.
Who, I used to do tastings out in the street, and they came over and said, we like what you're doing there, do you want to come and work for us? And the interview took place with a glass of Krug Rosé and Krug Vintage, and I was like...
And you just signed it immediately?
And then that was a proper grounding in fine wine.
Okay, brilliant.
And then from there, wanted to open my own place. So started Planet of the Grapes.
Okay, cool. So you started Planet of the Grapes, and the original idea was that it's just going to be a shop.
Yeah, shop on New Oxford Street and sell retail.
And is that where you started your first site, on Oxford Street?
Yeah, New Oxford Street, near the British Museum.
Yep.
And that was purely retail, although we did actually have a license, but it was like a shop. So you could drink in the shop, but we didn't advertise the fact.
Yeah.
And it was a bit like a sort of members club feel, even though it was just a shop.
Yeah.
And we had like the most amazing range, but then we didn't have huge staff overheads. The rent was, I think we paid 12 grand a year, like really nominal.
And where were you getting all your wines?
Bit of everything. A friend of mine had moved to Spain and sold some of his cellar to us, and he'd had loads of wines that he bought over the years. So we had that on the shelves, which was great because it was interesting and old vintages of lots of Spanish and actually Aussie stuff back in the day. And then there's some suppliers that we were using then that we still use now. So our first ever meeting with a rep was with Simon Haddon from Maison Marque, and he's still my rep at Maison Marque 20 years later.
Jesus. And
it's really annoying because I look terrible compared to 20 years ago, and Simon looks exactly the same.
Really?
He's like Peter Pan, I don't know. He's like he's drinking like, you know, like the Essentia Tokay.
Yeah.
I reckon he drinks
like a
little vial of that.
Breakfast.
Yeah, he's got something. He's got some trick. He hasn't shared it with me. But yeah, him, MMD, Liberty, quite early doors because we were buying from them with the company I used to work for, La Reserve. So we knew. So I think back in the day, Brett, who went on to start Vinoteca, he was part of Liberty when we were working at La Reserve. And so I knew him, and then from him, and then knew a guy called Tim was working there. And so people who then became quite senior at Liberty and potentially even moved on. But they've been our house champagne supplier for, I don't know, 17 years.
Fantastic,
something like that.
Eh?
And there's a guy called Max at Astrum Wines who we do some Italian stuff. Max came to see me when we opened our first bar in Leadenhall.
Yep.
And I remember showing it to him when it was still a closed unit.
Yeah. And
my daughter Maisie, who is 19 this September, was in a buggy as a baby.
Right.
And I was stood with it. And it's like, just had a baby, just moved house, and
we're
going to open a wine bar. And he's like, are you sure? But we stood there in the passageway in Leadenhall Market having a coffee. And just the amount of people that were walking past this little passageway. And he's like, it's quite busy, isn't it? And I was like, yeah. He said, just a little cut through. I said, yeah. And we only opened that because Mark's, my old business partner's wife, worked for, I think like Willis or AIG, one of the big insurance guys. And she said, there's a place around the corner from the office that's been empty for a while now. You should take it over.
Right. And
we looked into why it was empty, and you know the story about the Leadenhall bar.
No.
This is so funny.
No, tell us.
So it used to be called Wraps.
So this is Planet of the Grapes, Leadenhall.
Yeah, so Bull's Head Passage.
I first met you,
Bull's Head Passage.
Yeah.
And I've got friends of my wife's family, or family members who've worked in the insurance industry, and we remember talking about this at a later date. So the bar was called Wraps.
Yep.
WRAPS. Run by, I think, a sort of subsidiary of the Richardson clan.
Chicken wrap, you know.
Yeah, well, I think you could get something to eat. There were rumours that you could go up to the bar and ask for 4 San Miguels. Put your coat on the coat hook when you came in.
Yeah.
And then when you went to leave, the coat had moved to nearer the sort of bar area and the toilet. Mm-hmm. And your 4 San Miguels would cost you about 240 quid.
Yeah, okay.
Really weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, that got closed.
Yeah.
by the City of London Police.
And
it'd been closed
the
for a while.
clues in the name though, right?
So we took it over because we were discussing, and you know this whole thing doing retail and hybrid bars.
Yeah.
You have like wines that don't move like retail wise, and then you think, I'll do a bin end sale.
Yeah.
So I'll knock them down in price, sell them a bit cheaper, get the cash in, move on.
Yeah.
And Mark was like, we could do that, or we could just, serve them by the glass and make more margin. I was like, that's not a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's like, just got to pay for the rent and the staff and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
He's like, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. And we literally sat with like a napkin and some numbers, and it's like, okay. Mm-hmm. And so we thought, well, how difficult can it be to run a wine bar? So we opened the one in Leadenhall, and to be really honest with you, it was an absolute dream move because the rent is expensive because of where it is in the city, but the footfall is incredible, and they're all, it's like a drinking culture.
Yeah, in that location.
Yeah, and it's not like a sort of, there is a bit of boisterous kind of city boy kind of feel to it, but the city has become much more mixed, male and female.
And you don't have tourists dropping in there who want a Coke and a cheap sandwich.
No.
People go there because they want good wine.
You get the Harry Potter tours because Bull's Head Passage is Diagon Alley.
Yeah.
But other than that. Yeah. But yeah, it's around there, the pubs are the drinking pubs, the beer boys. And there were less and less old school wine bars, like the Balls Brothers, Davies of this world. And so we wanted to do that, but with a little bit less of a kind of old school Thai feel to it. So yeah, we went in and it was pretty successful from day one. And when you see the covers and how many seats it's got,
it's like 20 seats, right?
Yes, 26, I think, something like that. And you think, well, it can't take that much money, and then it takes half decent money, and then you go, it's crazy. It will never do more than 5 figures. It won't get to 5 figures, and then it gets to 5 figures, and you go, it's never going to do more than that. And it keeps creeping up.
That's brilliant.
And to get your mindset into the culture of a proper insurance industry wine bar, the best example is when I was, as you know, I sometimes worked behind the bar there back in the days.
Yeah.
This is what I love, by the way. They have staff. They're like, Matt never cleans the glasses. It's like, Matt has cleaned the glasses. Matt has driven the van. Matt has done everything. Yeah. I'm now at an age where I don't have to clean the glasses anymore. Yeah. That's why I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I was there one day and these guys came in and they were like, they're the classic, the black satchel
briefcase guys.
Yeah. And I learned that basically that's a contract, and they're the guys to sort of do the deal, and they'll literally get a signature. They do the deal, and then somebody from the office comes to the bar, picks up the satchel, and goes and processes the paperwork, and the people who signed the deal just get drunk. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And then you give them a receipt that says food and wine.
Yeah.
Times 6 people when there's 2 of them.
Yeah.
But one of them came in and he went, have you got something like nice light, I don't know, like a Pinot or something like that? Just nice red for us to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then his mate went, oh look, Amarone. I love Amarone. He went, yeah, that's fine. I love that.
That's not a light Pinot.
Light Pinot for lunch, like 16%. I think back in the days it would have been the Allegrini. They drank 3 bottles between 2 of them for lunch. And
like Churchill's old expression.
Yeah. This was what you got to drink.
When 2 gentlemen are having lunch and one's not drinking, then a Magnum is the preferred format of choice. Yeah, I don't think I butchered that a little bit, but you get.
I get the idea. Yeah.
So Leadenhall. So you had the place in Oxford Street. Then you opened Leadenhall.
Yep.
And then what did you do after that?
They went to redevelop the shop, and we had to move out the shop. Oh no, Bow Lane. Bow Lane happened after that. So Bow Lane, about 12 years ago. So about 8 years in to starting the company, we opened Bow Lane, which was I think years ago it had been a Balls Brothers, because we found like some architect plans in the safe in the office after we took it over.
Yeah.
And then it became a rum bar, and the lady who ran the rum bar was a really lovely lady, but she had worked in the city, didn't really have a huge experience running a bar.
It's brutal.
And she basically, I think she just up sticks and went back to the Caribbean. Can't blame her really. And we took that place over, and it took a while, that one. So whereas Leadenhall was like going well from day one, it was like a basement bar, which back in the old days were quite popular, and I think a victim of the fact that people tended to sort of in the kind of banking corporate law world, the daytime drinking used to be something that happened, and then it gradually got wheedled out.
Yeah.
A lot of it was like a lot of American owners coming in. A lot of it was just a change in culture. And so if you were a bit more junior in the company, it was kind of frowned upon to have the Magnum lunch and go back and do some important work.
Yeah, or attempt to.
Yeah. And so it wasn't as busy from day one, but we worked really hard on it. There's some building work that happened on Bow Lane, the passageway, which didn't really help. But then once that had finished and they had the new tube entrance, it just started getting busier.
Yeah.
And it was great because we could see 60 for like a wine dinner.
And you had some outside space as well, didn't you?
Just a little side bit. It took us a long time to get it to be making money, but it had started making money, and then COVID had come along. But in the meantime, before that, we'd also taken on a new site in Holborn, because the shop was up for redevelopment, so we moved to Sicilian Avenue.
Yep, that was a nice place.
Of all the sites we got, my wife does an amazing job making all the bars look beautiful
wow!
inside.
So she does all the
So
the stuff.
you went to the place on Sicilian looked beautiful,
it did look
and
amazing,
like really lovely furnishings, colours, everything like that. But the problem was the owners of the actual street. They just sold you a pack of lies. They said, "Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to bring some restaurants in, like a chocolatier, a little bakery." And what they did was they put their building manager in one of the units, and you were like, "What? That's not really attracting more people."
No.
And then you realised what they were actually doing was applying to redevelop the whole place. So we'd taken it on, and then they just let it go to ruin, and then
redeveloped it.
I think in the 5 years that we had a lease there, we had four owners. The first one changed before we'd even signed the lease.
Jesus.
And then there were 2 more sales in the meantime. It was crazy.
It's hectic, eh?
Yeah.
Difficult to run a business like that.
Yeah, it was difficult, and it struggled because there just was no footfall, because half the avenue was completely empty. So literally boarded up shops.
Yeah, I love that place. I used to go there.
Yeah, I loved it.
But not as much as the one in Leadenhall, because it was further from the office.
But they, I mean, for example, they had a massive office above the bar, and they let their lease run out and asked them to leave. So all the offices that were occupied above, they were empty because they wanted them empty so they could redevelop.
Yeah, and they wanted you out as well.
Yeah, so like that was difficult.
Yeah.
And but then at the same time, and it wasn't supposed to happen at the same time, we got Fox,
that beautiful old umbrella shop.
Yep.
So just for the listeners, Fox is a very old school, beautiful umbrella shop with the black and silver kind of ornate, like a silver fox, and you'd go in there and it's close to Moorgate Station. It's just a beautiful old building. It's probably listed, right?
Grade 2 star.
Grade 2
inside
star.
and out.
So what year did you get that?
That is 10 years old this year.
Nice.
So yeah, and I signed it on a decent length lease.
Yeah.
But a friend of mine phoned me and said, I'm stood inside an old umbrella shop in Moorgate, where are you? And I was in Bow Lane at the time.
Yeah.
And he went, you want to come up here now? Because this is going to go on the market and you should grab it before it goes on the market.
Wow.
And I walked straight through the front door. I actually phoned Katie, my wife, there and then. I went, I've got us a new bar. It's like,
fantastic.
We've got to take this place on.
Fantastic.
So that nearly killed us because we had 2 new projects.
And then you had to do it up and everything. That's expensive, the whole fit out.
Yeah. Have you ever done a fit out on a listed building?
No.
But they always say, they don't buy a listed building.
I've done a lot of stupid things before. I can tell you about it that really hurt. But
that crazy thing where the fire service will say you need to change those windows to fire windows, and then the listed building people come along and go, you can't change those windows. And you're like, which one is it?
Yeah.
and they never talk to each other.
So that delays everything by 6 months.
It delays things, and it also
makes it very expensive.
There's some things we wanted to do, so we managed to find some fridges, like the sort of standard double bar fridge was the perfect size to fit in a gap between the actual shelves, and the shop shelves in Fox is a 1927, I think it's Canadian maple wood.
Nice.
But it's like an Art Deco shop fit out, which itself is listed. So all the cabinetry is listed. And so I was saying, we found a fridge that perfectly fits in, but obviously we need to be able to plug it in and get access to the plug, which means having to drill a hole in the back of the. And they were like, yeah, you can't drill into the wood. And we're like, you wouldn't see it, and it's right at the back. So I had to get written permission from them to drill a hole to put a lead from a fridge, so you could then plug it behind.
Yeah.
And we weren't allowed to fix light fittings to the cabinetry. So we had to put like a lip above it and then put the lights into it. It's just all that stuff. Yeah.
But that's an amazing location. I mean, like with Moorgate changing over the years and the station and everything.
But you know that most people, when they see the Elizabeth line, all you see is Liverpool Street.
Yeah.
So if you say you're at Moorgate, the Elizabeth line is they don't comprehend that it's anywhere near the Elizabeth line.
Really?
Because they don't know that there's 2 station entrances.
Yeah.
So if you don't live or work in the city,
you wouldn't know.
And you don't go to the city, you wouldn't know. You just see the map and it says, it says Liverpool Street, Farringdon, Tottenham Court Road. But Tottenham Court Road, you can get out of Dean Street.
Yeah.
And you're in that part of Soho.
Yeah.
And so likewise in Liverpool Street, if you get out at that end of the train,
you don't think of Moorgate.
At the other end of the train, which is a kilometre away, you're at Moorgate.
Yeah.
So it connects Moorgate to everywhere. And that's
cool.
why Deutsche Bank moved in above the station. So we've got a lot of And it's different to Leadenhall. It's banking money.
Different clients, and you've also opened a new place in Dulwich, in your hometown.
500 metres from my front door.
And why would that be? Is it in case you run out of a chilled white?
Right. No, but so I have the key to the bar,
okay,
but not to the shutter.
Okay.
So I can't actually physically get in.
Okay.
And they were saying they have the camera pointing down the street, which is a requirement from the council. But I think the guys that help me run the company are like, that's so that when you leave the city, get out at East Dulwich Station and walk past, you don't think,
I'll just pop in for a
turn left and pop in there for one.
Yeah.
So we don't do that.
You're not tempted to pop in every now and then just to see how things are going.
I do pop in every now and then. Okay, for lunch.
See what the locals are up to.
I think the dream long term is that some rich South African buys my bars from me, and I have my own little local place to call my own. And I sit there with my dog and a bottle of Grand Cru Burgundy.
What kind of dog have you got?
A Whippet.
A Whippet.
A very nervous.
Does your Whippet go wine tasting with you?
Yeah. I can't take him anywhere for that kind of stuff. The wine tasting's fine, but as soon as there's any whiff of food, which for me is always around, if wine is open, there's normally food somewhere, and he just wants to eat the food. So
of course.
I take my wife instead. It's much easier that way.
It's much easier. Yeah, she just wants to drink the wine.
Yeah, and eat the food, but doesn't whine at me until it turns up. That's the difference.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Okay, cool. So you've had a really interesting kind of story about how you came up with the name and everything.
Yeah.
You must have some. Like, I'm not going to go into COVID, but that was pretty.
We don't talk about it anymore.
Pretty awful.
Let's go forward.
You must have some really funny stories with clients doing stupid shit, or people getting drunk in the bar, or anything funny like that.
Oh, well, you're like this, being South African. We did a Hamilton Russell dinner.
Okay.
With Anthony and
he's hilarious, right?
They had a proper argument between themselves, and then I think she walked out, which was quite funny.
Halfway through the tasting.
But he was a great presenter. The wines were great, but we decided we'd film it.
Okay.
Because it's a great way of marketing
for social media and everything.
Social media.
And which location was this?
This is at Bow Lane.
At Bow Lane,
This would have been like 10 years ago, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm so naive on all these things, but my friend Margie, who was working there at the time, said, we have to make sure everyone's happy with us filming them.
Yep.
Because you can't just film people and then post it without their permission. Yeah. I said, it'd be all right. So we sort of made the announcement that we were going to be taking some shots to use on the website. And this guy came up to me very quietly to the side, and he went, can you make sure you don't film me and my guest?
Oh yeah,
and we were like,
his lady guest,
his female guest was with him at the wine dinner, and I don't think he was like, so all shots had to be like not including that end of the table. I was like, okay, got it.
That's funny. That's funny.
But I mean, I think the city is an alien world for me. When I started Leadenhall with Mark, it was only because his wife worked in the city,
right?
And so I was fairly It's not that I didn't know that there was a kind of city culture.
Being in the city and spent, you don't get it.
It's really crazy. Yeah. But what's great is it does have this. There's a real liveliness. There's a buzz.
Yes.
And
a personality.
Yeah, and I think the city, as in the City of London Corporation, need to be very careful to not remove that. They're being very kind of, the open spaces are for everyone, not just the people who drink. I was like, well, I know what you mean, but that buzz is what gives the city a kind of, it gives a bit of a lift, and it's why people much prefer working in an area that's got that kind of going out, having a bit of fun kind of culture. You got the Canary Wharf place.
Yeah.
Canary Wharf works because people from outside of Canary Wharf go there and visit restaurants and other places and bars, get the buzz. But I think generally the thing that surprised me with going there was that just love of a night out. Yeah. But it being
that energy.
And the midweek energy.
But we have a quick sneaky Tuesday bender,
right? When we took over Fox, though, it's like the one thing that's made me laugh over the years, and I'll keep saying that because so far there's been no injuries, proper injuries, but we have some people, and it's not if they're drunk, it's just some people just don't look where they're going, and we've got like staircases listed.
You've got staircases all the way. You've got 3 or 4 floors.
Right? It's listed, and it's got this mirrored staircase. But when people fall down the staircase, it sounds exactly like the theme tune to EastEnders. It's like do 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 do, and I think it's because there's a bend to the staircase. And
this happens regularly.
Well, I've had it a number of times. I'll be like hosting a tasting, and then suddenly everyone will hear this noise, and you sort of open the door to check everything's okay, and somebody's just literally like
Dusting themselves.
Oh, sorry about that. No. Yeah, not to worry. Yeah, no problem. Have a great night. Bye bye. Yeah, never ceases to amaze.
I've got a funny stairs story that I wasn't going to tell. I wasn't thinking about, but many years ago, before I had the first Humble Grape, I used to do these pop-in wine tastings, and I used to rent restaurant space and buy charcuterie and stuff, and then get guests over there and charge a ticket price. And we did this event in Soho, and there was this guy who owned a small little restaurant in Soho, and we ran the wine tasting, and as we were in his downstairs bit, and he had his little deli and stuff upstairs, and all through the night he kept coming back asking for another glass, because he was the owner of the place, but he wasn't actually part of the wine tasting. And he kept on drinking, and he drank furiously all night.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the night, there were a few guests who wanted to stay on, and we thought, well, we'll support him. We're going to buy a few bottles upstairs. So he was kind of standing at the top of the stairs, and with another glass, probably his 8th or 9th glass of the evening, and there were a whole bunch of people sitting at the bar, and I saw him try and lean.
He only falls on horses.
He leaned on the bar and he rolled down the back of his own stairs. But at the bottom of the stairs, he'd done the whole place up all rustic. There was a giant bag of flour, like in a Hessian bag, and he hit the bag of flour.
Oh, no.
I looked down the stairs, he bounced off the bag of flour, went down some more stairs.
Right.
The bag of flour had an image of him.
Oh, the imprint.
And then he came back upstairs again.
I like it.
And he was completely
He had to have the flour on it.
He's still holding his wine glass.
I didn't break the
He
glass.
didn't break glass, still holding his wine glass, and he came back upstairs as if nothing had happened.
Well, he's obviously, but he's the proprietor, so he's the man who,
Exactly.
he's the licensee, so it's good to know that he's in charge.
Exactly.
He's got to get under control.
That was the funniest thing. If I'd had a photo of that, I would have,
Blimey.
funny stories, right?
Well, it is that thing where you have to have that kind of fine line between people having a nice time and enjoying themselves, and then being careful that they're not going a bit too over the top. But the thing in the city that's really funny is it's always very noticeable if there's somebody who shouldn't really be there.
Yes.
And
because they're not a city type. They've come in from Mayfair, or East London. God forbid.
We had a lady came into Fox, and it was brilliant because it was a friend of mine's daughter. It was her first ever shift working for us, and I happened to be there. And this woman had a drink outside, and I think one of the staff was a bit wary. They thought it was a bit of a strange lady. Mm-hmm. And she came back in and demanded another whiskey, and they refused to serve her. And she started mouthing off and shouting obscenities. And then she called me a fat "see you next Tuesday."
Okay.
To me, and I was
because you didn't want to serve her another whiskey.
You need to leave now.
Yeah.
She just wouldn't stop. She was going on at me, giving me loads of grief. And then my friend's daughter could see her kind of walking around. I think she just had that sixth sense that something was going to happen, and she went to just knock the glasses from the table, and she literally she went around the other side and caught them as they came the other side.
Right.
So I'm trying to usher her out, but without touching her, because that would have caused problems.
Yeah.
Anyway, I ushered her out, and I sort of followed her. And by this time, I'm phoning police because she was crazy. She was properly crazy. And the police are on the phone to me and say, can you describe her? I was like, blah, and I said, where's she gone? I went, she's actually gone into the pub. So I kind of went into the pub, carried on walking past, and I was trying to get the guys that I know in the pub saying, look, you have a nutter in your pub.
Yeah.
So I managed to get hold of them. I said, I don't know where she's gone, but she's come in, and I don't think she's come out. She's in the pub. And this time the police come. Anyway, the police turn up and say, look, we've got this under control. This is all fine.
Yeah.
So I go back to our wine bar, and then you can hear this massive commotion. I go back out to the side of the pub, and there's a police van, and there's a lot of police there.
Right.
And
for one woman.
I'm watching it all, and this woman is 4'8", kind of tiny.
Right.
Anyway, we'll wait for a little bit, and you can hear all this shouting, and they finally bring her out. They've tied her ankles, her thighs, and her wrists, and there are 7 police officers. And I'm talking to one of the WPCs, and the whole of the pub is
watching this.
It's like a live show,
yeah.
while you're having a drink.
Yeah.
And the WPC just said, "Yeah, are you the guy that called this in?" I said, "Yeah." And she went, "You from the pub?" And I went, "No, the wine bar next door." And she went, "Oh, great. So you sent her into the pub and they had to deal with that." And I was like, it wasn't like that. But she said, "Yeah, it's great because by the time we got to her in the pub toilet, she'd stripped naked and was sick over herself and attacked the police officers." And she said, "You saw the size of her?" I said, "Yeah." Then she literally got carried out of the pub. Jesus. And she said, "We had to dress her again and tie her up." And she said, "Well, it took 7 officers to calm her down." And I was like, wow.
Luckily,
she said, "What did you drink in your bar?" I was like, 1 whiskey. Then I have to go and check what's in the whiskey.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So back onto kind of slightly more serious matters.
Okay.
What do you think is the future for wine bars in London? You know, we've seen, like you described in the beginning, we started out with, you know, Jamie's and, you know, Ball's Brothers and Davies and all those kind of more old school. And then there was a phase where people were saying wine bars are dead, they're boring, no one wants to go. And then you had Planet of the Grapes, Vagabond, Vinoteca, Humble Grape, you know, all those kind of stuff. And now it's kind of changing again. Where do you think this is all going?
I don't know. I think COVID was really harsh to the wine industry, but particularly hospitality.
Yeah.
I think it made life very difficult. And I think I think Vinoteca and Vagabond probably both went into administration partly because of the COVID situation.
Yeah.
A couple of other little bits and pieces, maybe expanding a bit too much.
Yeah.
But also things like rail strikes made life even more difficult.
The rail strikes were a nightmare.
And the government had absolutely no sense. The past government and the new government don't seem to have any comprehension that problems from COVID are ongoing.
Yeah.
As in, there's lasting effects.
Mondays and Fridays is a little quieter.
Yeah, but also like the fact that people are paying debt from COVID. You know, you're paying debt,
like
and then the government are coming in and going, "Here's more costs for you to add into your."
I've still got a big Seabills. You've probably got one too, right?
I mean, we're like November, I think, pay the last of it.
This November.
It's 5 years.
We're next November.
Yeah. And you look at all of that and you think, just at a time when you need as much help as you can get, the government has given you higher minimum wage, which is great for the workers, but you've got to pay for it.
Yeah.
Now, if you're making loads of money and your costs are being controlled, but they've then given you more costs.
Yeah.
So they've gone, you have to pay the workers more money, but by the way, we're going to charge you more in national insurance.
Yeah.
We're going to they're just about to raise the business rates again.
Yeah.
Even though they know that we're struggling. And then they throw in things like the duty reform bill, which basically means much more paperwork for people like you and I, where we're shipping more wines ourselves. Yeah. So that's adding more administration
layer
costs.
upon layer, yeah.
And I just think it's becoming more and more difficult to run a hospitality business.
Yes, it is.
And let alone, I mean, the wine business itself is like, okay, that's, you know, it's hard work, but it's retail.
Mm-hmm.
It's less overheads, but the hospitality side of things is even more difficult.
Yes.
Just because of the costs involved. And then you know how it works. If you have somebody's on a minimum wage, you can't count service charge as that. So they get the minimum wage, but with service on top.
Yeah.
If you then add those two together, the person who's your supervisor then looks at the part-timers and goes, well, they're earning this take home.
Exactly.
So I want my basic to be that, but they then get service on top. Yeah. And so it's a knock-on effect. And so I think the problem is companies with bigger money who can buy, so Majestic coming in and buying some Vagabond, it's like Amazon taking over retail, the high street supermarkets. But
do you think you know, because I have a biased view that founder-led businesses are run better, more quirkier, better for the consumer than a big brand running a business like that? Do you think Vagabond's going to lose its sparkle with Majestic kind of running it?
I mean, people don't realise, but I think it had been taken over anyway
by
Ambiva. And so they're a much bigger backer and company in the first place.
They've got tons of money.
They've got tons of money, but they've got tons of people who want that money to turn into a lot more money.
Yeah.
And regardless of whether or not it loses its personality, they just want, I want this many bars. And they screwed it up by being too ambitious and doing it too quickly.
Yeah.
And so I think it gets a point where you think maybe it's great to expand. It's great to become bigger, and if the ultimate aim is to sell the business, that's the idea. But also you've got to do it in a kind of way where it happens organically and you can control it.
And it
as soon as
maintains
you're
its
not
essence.
if you don't control it, then
Yeah.
I mean, I'm in this lucky position with the bar in Leadenhall, and more so at Fox, where I don't have to be there. I turn up at Leadenhall, they think I'm a courier. Like, think I've got delivery.
You've got a package.
Yeah. It comes to the summer, I'm always in shorts and t-shirt.
Yeah.
And they're just like, and they'll say
But you've
to the
always
staff,
been in shorts and t-shirt.
Yeah. They were like, yeah, guys, you got delivery, and you're like, oh, it's Matt. Don't worry about him. But that is the kind of dream. But it's also like the wines on the shelf. I think that's changed, and I think, like you were saying, the way it's changing, I think, is that the smaller bars like ourselves are much more determined to have our own wines on the shelves.
Yes.
Because the high street has the wines that the big brands sell.
And those are
the
boring,
sell.
right?
Yeah, and some of them are great. The wines are great, but they're like, well, it's everywhere. So we have. I'm not going to name names, but there are multiple producers who will say things to us now like, you have to take your year allocation of the wines up front.
Right.
Pay within 30 days for the entire allocation, because it's so sought after. And you go, okay, but so sought after that all of my customers could go and buy all of those wines from a broker tomorrow.
Yeah.
For a broker who's making a 10 or 12% margin.
Yes.
Without any of my overheads. So why would I bother?
Yes.
And I'm like, but you want them on your shelves. I said, no, you want me to have them on my shelves.
Yeah.
But you want your cake and you want to eat it.
Yeah.
So you want to sell it to everyone. And you get to the point where you go, well, actually, there are some customers who really love those brands and those iconic wines.
But not enough for me
there's
to pay.
another 98% of my customers who want me to have a wine that I'm quite passionate about and we love and we know what it tastes like in the producer.
That cheeky Palomino you've got in your glass.
Yeah, like that Palomino. So, as an example, there's a very famous Amarone producer that was brought in by one of the big importers. We used to sell a lot of it. And then Tesco's were selling it from their fine wine club.
Yeah, for like a quarter of the price you were.
Yeah, but like for 10% more than I'm buying it for.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore.
Yeah.
And so now we're part of the Vindies buying group, so the cooperative.
Yeah.
And within the group, we had some little tasting sessions, and we were looking for a Gruner Veltliner producer and a Valpolicella producer. And we found both, and they were, of all the samples that were sent in, and then we're talking like 250, 300 bottles of wine to go through. Yeah. But two producers that just jumped out and went like, these are good, like benchmark, really good quality, bit of personality.
Brilliant.
And that Amarone is now the main Amarone we sell in the bars. But from a great guy called Paolo, beautiful estate, I took my wife to Verona, we drove out to Lake Garda, lunch at Bardolino.
Nice.
20 minutes later, you're sat on his terrace looking over the vineyards.
Fantastic.
And it's like that, like literally from the producer to your wine shelves without any middlemen.
Yeah, and that's what you want, really.
Yeah, it's great.
That's what makes us special.
Yeah, and I think that's the way forward. I think that's how we have to do it. You have to do something different to the rest of them. And I think that we made a stance years ago to avoid, as a general rule, the Grand Marque champagnes.
Yeah.
Not because we don't like them, but
because
we do.
We love drinking them, but we don't want to sell them because everyone else has them.
Yeah, exactly. But also, like, they don't do you any particular deals, and then you go to the supermarket and the champagne's over there. Yeah. But some of them are brilliant, and we might get the odd cuvee from them that we really like on the shelf. But you go out and find a brilliant other champagne house that's not so well known. So Devoe's our house, brilliant from further south, Côte de Bar. But we also, as well as Devoe, we also now have this great producer called Delavin, who only make Grand Cru. Okay. And I think they made like 40,000 bottles.
That's brilliant. As opposed to someone like Verve who makes 12 million bottles, right?
And
it's different.
I've just sent some customers to go and see them last week, and they were just blown away. They're like, it's like a family that owned vineyards that they sold
and
the grapes.
Make wine,
and then a few generations ago said, let's make our own.
Fantastic.
And it's just that,
so that
from vineyard to bottle to shelf.
Like exactly. That. So vineyard to bottle to shelf, straight from you into your wine shop to your customers. That's how you like it. I'm going to end up with my favourite last question that I ask wine people. People ask me this all the time, what's your favourite wine and all that kind of stuff. And it's impossible for me to say which one because I love so many.
Yeah.
But if you had to choose a region and you could only drink wine from that region for the rest of your life.
Oh, man.
Right? No, this is hard. It's hard. What would it be and why?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, see, you know what? It would have been... I'm Burgundy. I'm a Burgundy man.
Yeah.
I love the fact you can drink amazing Chardonnay and amazing Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
But, and there's a big but coming.
Yeah.
I just went to Piedmont with a load of clients. It was 11 of us.
Those Nebbiolos,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, but it's the fact that it's not just the Nebbiolo.
Yeah,
it's the Nebbiolos,
the
and the Dolcettos, and the Barberas,
yeah.
and the Timorassos.
Yeah.
You know, and the other kind of crazy
so would that be
grapes.
Would that be your region?
Well, the problem is
you'd miss the Burgundies.
Yeah, I'd miss the yeah. I feel like I'm cheating on my wife by saying Piedmont, not Burgundy.
Exactly.
I like both.
Yeah.
I like both.
I like both.
Yeah. It's like the classic French. French where it's like, of course I have a mistress.
Yeah.
I've got like Piedmont's my mistress.
Oh, I like Burgundy, but I will drink Bordeaux.
But when we took the trip, everyone's like, we went to like 5 estates, and I sent out to the guy saying, look, if we want drivers, then they're going to cost money. And everyone's like, yeah, but it's like having a taxi service to go from winery to restaurant.
Yeah.
So we did that.
Cheaper than buying a new car.
Yeah. But it was great because it meant I actually could just relax and just enjoy the lunches and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what's amazing is that the big Barolos that need time, they're great. And people could see that was like a young wine, you'd have to age it.
Yeah.
But then they will bring out their Langhe Nebbiolos and you're like,
those are
that's
fabulous.
Just like juicy and
I
yummy.
know, just drink those all day, right?
Like, whoa. And the great thing about those guys is like, a little bit of global warming is probably just meaning that they have a bit more consistency. Rather than being over-baked and hot and over the top, they're just like, we're getting more consistency. So the Alta Langhe, the Gemmas, the Gatinaras, those kind of stuff. It's like, it's exciting.
Well, thank you very much, Matt, for coming on the show. For some of the Planet of the Grapes loyalists, followers, lovers, this has been Matt from Planet of the Grapes. Thanks for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
If someone had to come to Planet of the Grapes in the next couple of weeks, a quick tip on just one white that you would suggest that they absolutely have to try.
Ooh, blimey. Well, this is controversial because having said all of the wines that we ship direct, and I absolutely love them.
Yeah.
But I've been drinking this wine recently, and I think it's a producer who's really famous in Spain.
Okay.
But is brought in by one of the important.
Right.
And that's the Rafael Palacios, Valdeorras, where he's the Lauro Godeo.
Nice.
It's absolutely brilliant. And it's like, I mean, Albariños are lovely. We've got some great Albariños.
Yeah, but Godeo.
Yeah.
And for the guests, Godeo spelled Godello. Yeah. And Rafael Palacios.
Yeah, so his brother Alvaro is the really famous.
Yeah.
Makes the flashy, and he's the flashy brother.
Yeah.
Rafael's the kind of understated brother who makes the understated, elegant whites.
Nice.
And they are really. But the Lauro has hit this sweet spot.
Brilliant.
And it's absolutely delicious.
Brilliant.
I'm going to go and drink one now.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.